Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling a really interesting company, one that seems like a bit of a contradiction. It's Booz Allen Hamilton, BAH. They've been around for, what, 110 years? Started as management consultants.
That's right. Pioneers in the field, right?
And now,
Sure.
they call themselves an advanced technology company, and almost all their money, like 98%, comes from the U.S. government.
Yeah, it's a fascinating setup. A century-old firm that's now basically the tech engine for huge parts of U.S. national security. AI, cyber, quantum, they're deep in all of it.
So that's our mission today. We want to unpack this transformation. How did they pivot so hard from consulting to building and running critical tech systems? We'll look at where they dominate technologically, touch on some recent financial hiccups, the volatility.
Right, the earnings miss and guidance cut.
Exactly. But also look at their fundamental role in things like autonomous warfare and what comes next.
And a key figure in all this is the chairman and CEO, Horacio Rozanski. His focus on speed, they call it velocity, and that laser focus on the government mission, that really shapes everything they do now. It's less consulting firm, more national security tech specialist.
Okay, let's get into that transformation then, because you hear Booz Allen Hamilton, and maybe you still picture, I don't know, suits and strategy decks.
And that's fair, given their history. They started way back, 1914, Edwin Booz. They really did help invent management consulting. Things like time and motion studies. That was them back in the day, helping industry get efficient. For decades, they served big companies, government, globally.
But then came 2008, a huge shift. They split the company. The commercial consulting arm dealing with, global corporations went one way.
And the federal technology business, the government work, went another, completely separate.
Why do that? Was it just like business focus?
It was more than that. It was really about protecting the national security side. When you're doing sensitive government work, especially classified stuff, operating globally creates, well, risks, conflicts of interest, security issues.
Okay.
Brzezinski himself mentioned being sanctioned by Iran and Russia because of their government work. That kind of thing makes it hard for colleagues to travel or operate if the company's still tied up in global commercial deals.
Ah, I see. So splitting it off was a way to insulate the critical government tech work, keep it secure, focused purely on U.S. interests.
Exactly. It walled it off. Ensured they could maintain clearances, focus entirely on the mission without the complexities and potential compromises of the global commercial market.
That makes a lot of sense. So today, their main job isn't really giving advice anymore, is it?
Not primarily, no. They design, they build, and they operate critical technology systems. That's the core, and the focus is clear. About 3/4 of their business is national security defense, intel-related civil stuff.
And they have this strategy you mentioned at Volt.
Right. VOLT. Velocity, Leadership, and Technology. It sounds a bit like corporate speak, maybe, but the core idea is delivering speed to outcomes.
Speed, okay.
In national security, whether it's getting a new cyber defense up or upgrading a weapon system, speed matters. Urgency is baked in. So they've oriented the whole company around moving fast.
And that speed, that tech focus really comes through when you look at their AI work. This seems to be a huge part of their story now. They're apparently the biggest AI provider to the federal government.
The scale is pretty impressive. The AI business is hitting around, $800 million in revenue for fiscal 25. And it's not just a small team. They've got over 2,000 people working specifically on AI.
2,000 AI professionals. That's significant.
And it's not just specialists. They've pushed AI literacy across the company. Something like half the entire workforce has some kind of AI certification.
Half the company. Wow, so it's really baked into the culture.
It seems to be, yeah. It's an institutional thing. And that ties back to Rozanski's point about speed. He literally said, speed is the most important weapon in today's world.
He's talking about geopolitical competition there, right?
Yeah.
Particularly with China.
Absolutely. He's worried about the U.S. losing its technological edge. And the way China approaches AI is concerning from that perspective.
How so? Are their models just better?
Not necessarily better in terms of raw power like some of the giant U.S. models, but China seems to be specializing in AI models that are maybe less complex, often open source, but critically they run on cheaper, simpler hardware.
Okay, why does that matter? Cheaper hardware.
Think about it globally. If you're a country without massive data centers or reliable power grids or tons of money for high-end chips, these simpler, cheaper models become really attractive. They're easier to deploy everywhere.
Right, so China could flood the market, so to speak, with these lower-end AI systems.
And that's the worry Rozanski voiced. The risk of ending up in a global Chinese internet, where AI models from, as he put it, suspect provenance are running everywhere and constantly calling home.
Meaning they could be collecting data, shaping narrative.
Exactly. A persistent, low-cost way to gather intelligence and exert influence across huge parts of the world.
So Booz Allen's answer is to take the really advanced stuff, the cutting-edge commercial tech from, say, Silicon Valley, and make it work for the government's specific, often harsh conditions. They call it missionizing.
That's their niche, their value add. Taking tech designed for perfect lab conditions or massive cloud infrastructure and making it robust, secure, and functional in places with bad connections, limited power, extreme environments, where the military and intelligence agencies actually operate.
That sounds like serious engineering work, not just plugging things in.
Oh, definitely. You're dealing with latency, connectivity dropping out, needing to shrink models down, embedding layers of security that commercial tech just doesn't need.
There's a great example of this, isn't there, with Meta's AI model and the International Space Station?
Yeah, that one's pretty wild. They took Meta's Llama AI vision language model, state-of-the-art stuff, and got it running on the ISS.
Okay, running AI in space, challenging. But the kicker is the hardware, right?
Right. They didn't put new computers up there. They got Llama running on the existing ISS computers, which are apparently equivalent to, like, an old 486. We're talking 20-year-old tech.
A 486? I haven't heard that number in ages. Why is the ISS using such old hardware? Seems counterintuitive for a high-tech space station.
It boils down to reliability and certification in extreme environments. Space hardware has to be radiation-hardened, vibration-proofed. The testing and certification process takes forever, literally decades sometimes. So by the time a piece of hardware is cleared for flight, it's often generations behind commercial tech. They can't just swap out CPUs every couple of years like we do down here.
Okay, that makes sense. So BAH had to somehow make this cutting-edge AI model work on ancient radiation-hardened hardware. What was the point? What did it do?
It was about accessing information locally. They fed it tons of manuals, technical documents for the station, so astronauts could just ask it questions directly without waiting for a slow signal back to Earth. The example they gave was an astronaut asking, "How do I unclog a toilet in the space station?"
Right. Practical problems, solved locally, instantly, using AI on old tech. That really shows their specific skill set.
It's about making advanced tech actually usable at the edge, under tough constraints. It's not just integrating off-the-shelf stuff, it's making it survive and function when things get difficult.
We see that speed thing again with their Palantir partnership too, right? Something about integrated warfighting.
Yeah, they worked with Palantir on a concept for combining different data streams for military planning. And the notable part was the speed they went from just an idea on a whiteboard to a working prototype in 45 days.
45 days. From concept to something being tested in military exercises.
That's what the sources say. That kind of compressed timeline is exactly what Rosansky means by velocity, getting capability out there fast because adversaries aren't waiting around.
If you can test and deploy in weeks instead of years, that changes the game.
Completely changes the calculus for staying ahead technologically.
Well, hang on. This focus on speed, velocity, getting things done in 45 days, doesn't that inherently create risks? We know BAH has had issues with oversight, billing, data handling. Is there a tension between moving that fast and maintaining strict controls?
That's absolutely the core tension. And it's not unique to BAH. Any large contractor faces this. Speed is a national security imperative, but it puts enormous strain on compliance, on internal checks, on training. If the governance can't keep up with the pace of technology integration and deployment,
That's where things can go wrong.
that's where the failures can happen. The picture we get is a company deliberately engineered for speed, which inherently raises the stakes, potential for high reward, but also potential for significant compliance or ethical lapses if those controls slip.
Okay, let's shift from the AI software side to securing the actual digital infrastructure, cyber defense, and then connecting that to physical threats like drones.
Right, the cyber challenge for government agencies is just massive right now. Part of it is modernization itself. Agencies are moving away from old self-contained systems.
Towards microservices, cloud environments, everything's more distributed.
Exactly. Microservices, multi-cloud, hybrid cloud, plus everyone accessing things remotely on mobile devices. The old idea of secure network perimeter, a castle wall, it's just gone.
Which leads to this concept of zero trust. You can't trust anything implicitly just because it's inside the network anymore.
Precisely. Zero trust means you have to constantly verify everything. Every user, every device, every connection attempt, every single time. It's necessary, but the consequence is this unbelievable flood of data logs, telemetry, access requests. Way too much for humans to sift through manually.
And there's a shortage of skilled cyber analysts anyway.
A critical shortage. So you have this data tsunami and not enough people. That's where AI comes back in, specifically for observability. Using AI and machine learning to monitor everything, spot anomalies, prioritize real threats.
So the AI acts like a filter, finding the needles in the exponentially growing haystack.
Basically, yeah. As Imran Umar, their VP of Zero Trust, put it, AI provides the smart strategies to manage the scale. It helps the human analysts focus their limited time on the most sophisticated, potentially dangerous threats.
And the threats are sophisticated now. It's not just lone hackers. We're talking nation-states.
Right. The sources mention Volt Typhoon, that Chinese-linked group. They are allegedly targeting critical infrastructure in Guam.
Guam? Why Guam?
Strategic location. The alleged goal wasn't just data theft. It was about testing U.S. military readiness, gaining persistent access to potentially disrupt communications or operations in a crisis scenario. It's about positioning for future conflict.
So BOH's job is to build the zero trust frameworks and deploy the AI tools needed to detect and shut down those kinds of stealthy long-term intrusions by state actors.
Exactly. And that defense posture extends from the digital world to the physical. Which brings us to drones, or what they sometimes call physical AI. This is another huge strategic shift BAH is involved in.
This is the idea of prioritizing cheap, numerous systems over small numbers of incredibly expensive ones.
That's the core idea. Affordable mass versus exquisite platforms. What we're seeing in conflicts now suggests that sometimes swarms of relatively cheap, smart drones can be more effective, or at least more cost-effective, than a single multi-million or billion-dollar aircraft or ship.
The trade-off makes sense. If a drone costing a few $1,000s can disable or take out a radar system worth $100 million.
That's a trade worth making, as they say. It flips the economics of warfare. Suddenly, quantity and affordability become major strategic advantages alongside quality.
And BAH is trying to accelerate this by investing in things like expeditionary manufacturing through partners like Firestorm Labs.
Yeah, this is a really interesting concept, trying to solve what they call the contested logistics conundrum.
Contested logistics. Explain that. What's the problem they're solving?
Think about operating in a place like the Indo-Pacific. Supply lines are incredibly long, potentially vulnerable. If a part breaks on a Navy ship or a Marine Corps vehicle, thousands of miles from the nearest major base.
Getting a replacement could take weeks or months, right? And the supply lines themselves could be attacked.
Exactly. Traditional logistics, flying parts in, shipping them, storing them in big centralized depots, is slow and creates targets. If those depots or airfields get hit, the whole supply chain breaks down.
So expeditionary manufacturing means making the parts right where you need them.
That's the idea. Put industrial-grade 3D printers, described as the Ferrari of 3D printers, inside standard 20-foot shipping containers. These containers are rugged, mobile, can be deployed quickly near the front lines.
Like mobile mini-factories.
Pretty much. They can be set up in less than a day. So instead of waiting weeks for a spare part to be shipped across the ocean, potentially under threat.
A unit in the field sends the digital blueprint to the container, and they print the part right there, maybe in hours.
That's the goal. Just-in-time production at the edge. It speeds up, repairs dramatically, keeps the equipment operational, and makes the supply chain much less vulnerable because it's decentralized.
So again, it comes back to speed. Reducing the time it takes to get code deployed, or reducing the time it takes to get a physical part, accelerating everything.
It's the common thread. Which leads us to the really long-term bet. Quantum computing. BAH isn't just watching this space. They're actively involved in tackling the fundamental challenges.
And they're hiring some pretty specialized people for it, right? Like astrophysicists.
Yeah, the range is incredible. One day hiring someone to work on quantum physics, the next hiring someone to maintain a COBOL system from the 1960s. It shows the sheer breadth of tech the government relies on.
So what's the big hurdle with quantum right now?
The biggest one is error correction. Quantum bits, or qubits, are ridiculously sensitive. Tiny changes in temperature, vibration, any environmental noise can cause errors in their calculations.
And fixing those errors takes a lot of extra computing power.
A massive amount of classical computing power running alongside the quantum processor, constantly checking and correcting. Because you need so much overhead for error correction, the first truly useful fault-tolerant quantum computers might need to be physically enormous.
That's the size of a football field analogy.
Exactly. Just to house the qubits and all the control and error correction systems needed to make them stable enough for complex problems, it's just not practical for widespread use yet.
So we need to make the hardware way more efficient, particularly the control systems.
That's a key bottleneck. And that's where BAH's partnership with a company called SEQC comes in. They're focused on the hardware engineering.
What are they trying to do specifically?
Their big goal is to drastically reduce the power needed to control a single qubit. Right now, it takes something like 2 to 5 watts per qubit. SEQC is aiming to get that down to 3 nanowatts.
Watts down to nanowatts. That's huge. What is that, 9 orders of magnitude?
1 billion times more energy efficient for the control systems. That's the kind of breakthrough needed to shrink these machines down from football fields to something more manageable, more scalable.
And less power means less heat, too, which is another big problem for quantum.
Absolutely. It makes the whole system more stable, more reliable. This partnership is about BAH getting involved early in solving the fundamental scaling problems so they're ready to integrate quantum when it matures.
And when it does mature, what are the first things quantum computers will actually be good for? It's not running websites, right?
No, not initially. The first big applications are expected to be in areas like material science and chemistry, using something called Hamiltonian simulation.
Okay, Hamiltonian simulation.
Basically simulating the energy and behavior of molecules at a quantum level. Classical computers, even supercomputers, really struggle to accurately model complex molecular interactions. It just takes too much power.
So a quantum computer could precisely model how a new drug interacts with the protein or the properties of a new material.
Exactly. It would act like a specialized math coprocessor, tackling problems that are currently impossible for classical machines. Think designing new catalysts, new alloys, better batteries, understanding complex chemical reactions. BAH wants the U.S. to be first in line to use that capability for defense materials, energy, medicine.
Okay, shifting from that far future vision back to the present day. We need to talk about Booz Allen's recent financial performance. It hasn't been smooth sailing lately.
No, it hasn't. Despite the strong tech story, their Q2 results for fiscal 26 were a disappointment for the market. They missed analyst estimates, reporting earnings per share of $1.49 on sales of $2.9 billion.
What caused the miss? Was demand suddenly drying up?
It wasn't really a demand issue, more of a cash flow and timing issue. The main driver was a continued funding slowdown from the government. When Congress delays appropriations or passes continuing resolutions, it creates uncertainty, and agencies slow down, awarding new contracts or releasing funds.
So the money tap slowed down even if the need was still there.
Right, and that forced BAH to cut costs, including some employee severance, which impacted their earnings.
Which parts of the business got hit hardest?
Primarily their civil business. Think agencies like the IRS, EPA, etc. Defense and intel contracts are often longer term, more insulated from short-term budget fights. Civil work can be more dependent on annual discretionary funding, so it feels the squeeze first. They had to do a reset, a restructuring in that area.
And this led them to cut their forecast for the full year quite significantly.
Yeah, that's what really spooked investors. They slashed their full-year revenue guidance down to between $11.3 and $11.5 billion. Wall Street had been expecting something closer to $12.8 billion before that.
That's a huge cut, over $1 billion off the top line expectation. What does that kind of sudden revision tell you about how sensitive they are to the government's budget process?
It shows you exactly how uncertainty in Washington translates directly to their bottom line, especially in the non-defense parts of the business. It wasn't that the government suddenly stopped needing their services, it's that the process of funding slowed down, forcing BAH to react quickly with cost cuts and a lowered outlook. The pain was real, particularly for the civil sector work.
But if you look beyond that immediate turbulence, the longer-term picture seems much stronger. Right? There's a big contrast there.
Absolutely. The underlying demand signals are still incredibly robust. The key metric is their backlog, the amount of work they've already secured but haven't billed for yet. It hit a record $40 billion in Q2.
$40 billion? That's a lot of future work already locked in.
It's massive. It represents multi-year, mission-critical projects that aren't going away just because of a temporary budget slowdown.
Yeah.
That backlog provides a huge cushion and visibility into future revenue.
And they're still winning new work at a good clip, too. The book-to-bill ratio.
Yeah, that was strong, too, at 1.7x for the quarter. Meaning for every dollar they billed, they booked $1.70 in new contracts. So even with the payment delays causing near-term pain, the pipeline of future work is very healthy. It shows the long-term structural need for what they do, especially in defense and intelligence.
Okay, now we have to address the elephant in the room when talking about any major government contractor, especially one this deeply embedded: the risks, the ethical challenges, the oversight issues.
Right, it comes with the territory. Operating in this high-stakes, highly regulated environment inevitably carries risks, and BAH has faced some significant ones. The forces highlight two major recent issues investors need to be aware of. First, that big procurement fraud settlement in July 2023.
How big was it, and what exactly did they do wrong?
They agreed to pay $377.4 million to settle claims they improperly billed the government. It was characterized as one of the largest settlements of its kind. The allegation was that between 2011 and 2021, they were misallocating indirect costs.
Indirect costs, like overhead.
Exactly. Costs related to their commercial or international business, things like marketing. Internal projects were allegedly being improperly charged to their U.S. government contracts where those costs didn't belong or weren't proportional.
So the government alleged taxpayers were effectively subsidizing BAH's non-government work for a decade. That's serious.
Very serious. And the second major issue is still ongoing: the IRS data leak lawsuit, Warren v. Booz Allen Hamilton.
This involves that former employee, Charles Littlejohn.
Right. He worked for BAH under contracts at the IRS between 2018 and 2021. He admitted using his BAH credentials to improperly download and leak confidential tax information of thousands of wealthy Americans, including really high-profile people, to ProPublica.
And the lawsuit claims BAH is responsible because their security wasn't good enough, which seems ironic for a top cybersecurity firm.
That's the core allegation. The suit claims BAH essentially gave employees like Littlejohn unrestricted and unmonitored access to sensitive IRS databases. They allege BAH failed to implement adequate controls to track what he was searching for, downloading or uploading to external sites.
So they allegedly didn't have the systems in place to catch him pulling down tax returns for people like Trump, Bezos, Musk.
That's what the lawsuit alleges: a failure of monitoring and security controls, enabling the breach. Littlejohn pleaded guilty to the disclosure, but the civil suit against BAH, focusing on their alleged negligence in safeguarding the data, continues.
So it's this real duality: a company vital for national tech leadership, leading in AI, cyber, quantum, but also grappling with these major past and ongoing issues around financial controls and data security.
That really sums it up. High stakes, high reward, high risk.
Yeah.
You have the indispensable nature of their work on one side and the inherent dangers and potential for failure in this complex environment on the other.
So bringing it all together, what's the investment thesis here? How should you think about Booz Allen Hamilton?
Based on everything we've looked at, our sources really point towards viewing BAH as a long-term strategic investment. But you have to go in with eyes wide open about the short-term risks. So we'd rate it a buy, but for patient investors.
Patient because of that near-term volatility, the funding slowdowns, the earnings hit.
Exactly. That risk is real and driven by the government budget cycle, especially outside of core defense. We saw the stock drop after that Q2 miss. However, that's balanced against this incredibly strong, arguably indispensable technological moat they've built.
Their dominance in AI for government, their cyber work, the forward position in quantum.
Right. And that massive $40 billion backlog. That provides a strong degree of certainty about future revenue streams, underpinning the long-term case.
So the core argument is that the U.S. needs what BAH does: the specialized tech integration, the speed, the ability to operate in secure environments to maintain its edge, and that fundamental need outweighs the short-term budget noise and even the serious historical risks.
That's the long-term bet. You have to acknowledge the severity of things like the fraud settlement and the ongoing IRS lawsuit. Those represent real financial and reputational risks. But ultimately, their unique capability to missionize advanced tech for critical government puts them in a vital position that's hard to replicate.
They're the integrators, the ones who make the cutting-edge stuff actually work in the real, messy world of national security.
Precisely. They don't always invent the core science, but they're essential for translating it into operational capability, fast, delivering that speed to outcomes.
And maybe a final thought to leave people with, one that kind of shows the potential impact of what they do, even internally. They implemented a self-service analytics system using Tableau for their own finance team.
Yeah, replacing some old, clunky manual reporting process. It sounds minor, maybe.
But the result, the finance team saved 5,200 hours a year, just on pulling data together manually.
5,200 hours. That's like 2 people working full-time for almost a whole year, just spent on wrestling with data that should have been easily accessible.
It's a small example, but it really highlights the kind of inefficiency that exists in huge, complex organizations like the federal government. And it shows the value proposition of the technologies BAH implements, streamlining, automating, speeding things up. It helps explain why that $40 billion backlog exists. There's a massive need for this kind of modernization.
Absolutely. Their mission is to accelerate America. And sometimes that acceleration starts with simply making basic data flow smoothly. It shows how fundamental improvements can unlock huge amounts of productivity, whether it's for their own finance team or for a critical national security mission.